We have another very brave person who is here anonymously because of the culture of fear in our country, but you will hear what he has to say.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm a nurse and a former EMT. I've worked in healthcare for 15 years, and I've served in Santa Clara County in several different hospital systems over the last 5 years. I'm here today to speak a little bit about how anticipation of Medicare and Medicaid cuts are already affecting how our county system is coming down on nurses and decreasing safety for patients. I'm going to also talk a little bit about how if this House funding bill gets passed over the next month or two, and we actually see those Medicare and Medicaid cuts implemented, what that's going to mean for our healthcare system moving forward. And then I'm going to speak a little bit about the people that our country is disappearing, because deportations are not what's happening, disappearing is what's happening. And I think it's important for us to understand that. First off, the big things that are happening right now in our county that's affecting our day-to-day work as nurses and healthcare providers in the county is that the county has implemented a furloughing process for nurses in anticipation of cutting. So we are running nurses short, which increases nurse stress. It affects their financial stress as well, and increases the likelihood of sentinel events with our patients. All of us will be patients one day, and when you have overworked nurses that are understaffed because the hospital system is worried about not having money, you have patients die, you have bad outcomes, you have harm to patients, and these are things that are starting to happen in our hospital system right now. They're already furloughing nurses, laying them off, and they are moving them. They're also forcing nurses to float from one area specialty, such as ICU, to a progressive care unit, or from a progressive care unit to a medical surgical unit, or to the emergency room. Nurses spend years developing their specialty and becoming competent in the specific area that they work in. And right now they're being forced to float to other hospitals, to other types of specialties within the hospital, and take care of patients in the specialty that they haven't been trained in, and maybe they get a day or two of orientation, and then they're doing these things. This is bad for nurses, it's bad for the healthcare workers that support them, and it's bad for our patients, and it increases the likelihood of sentinel events, patients dying, and harm coming to our patients. We should all be terrified that this is happening. And this is how they're responding, with anticipation of what's moving forward. So I think that's very scary. I think you all should take a minute to let that sink in. Moving forward, if the House is actually able to get this funding bill through Congress in the next month or two, there's no way that they're going to be able to institute the tax cuts that they're talking about doing without actually cutting Medicaid and potentially Medicare. These are the foundation of our hospital system. This is going to negatively affect every hospital across the entire country. The specific things that we're really going to see is that we're going to see community hospitals closing or reducing services, which brings worse outcomes to our patients. And we're also going to see long-term care facilities shuttering and closed. Even if you have the money to pay for long-term care, you're going to have fewer options and be much farther away from your family, simply because there will be far fewer long-term care facilities, and people that don't have money are going to be left hanging. These are the realities for us moving forward if House spending cuts actually get passed in this funding bill this next month or two. This is the reality of what we're living in, working in hospitals right now, and thinking about. These are the emails that we're getting from our leadership in the hospitals at the moment, and it should be something that terrifies every single person here. Why are they talking about doing these Medicare cuts? I think it's important also to understand the historical context to it. Our country's debt's been ballooning since George Bush Jr., but really, under Donald Trump, during his first term, he instituted some of the largest tax cuts that our country has ever seen, and he ballooned our national debt by $8 trillion, which is putting our governments into some problems right now, because he instituted all these tax cuts without actually decreasing spending to pay for it. And so our debt ballooned by $8 trillion under the Trump administration, which is the most debt that our country has ever had balloon under any president. Donald Trump is literally the most fiscally irresponsible president that our country has ever seen. They always criticize Democrats for that. It's the Republicans now that are the most fiscally irresponsible. $8 trillion, $5 trillion of that came from tax cuts that were not paid for. Now that debt, with the interest rates that have been paid through the Biden administration, ballooned by $3 trillion. And now they want to cut tax cuts. They want to institute more tax cuts, and there's no way that they're going to be able to pay for them. Even if they cut all the Medicare and all the Medicaid in the world, that's not going to make up for the amount of tax cuts that they're talking about. But they want to soften the blow and decrease the amount of ballooning the national deficit in general. And so that's why they're looking at cutting our Medicare and Medicaid dollars. If they are successful with this, this will be the largest stratification of wealth that our country has ever seen to the upper class. They're going to cut all these social services that pay for services for us in the lower and the middle class and stratify wealth upward with tax cuts and then balloon our deficit. And that's the reason behind what we're facing right now in our hospital system. It's scary and it's terrifying, and it's something we should all be concerned about.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And the next thing I want to move on to before I yield the microphone is talking about how we are disappearing people in this country. It sometimes bothers me when I hear people talking about these as deportations, because when you deport somebody, you put them in front of a judge, and that person has a chance to argue their case and say that and then they're judged by that judge to not be legally in the country, and they're flown to their country where they came from and are released free into that country to continue to lead their lives. That is not what's happening right now. Most of you are familiar with the 300 people that the United States government put on a plane and flew to El Salvador and put into that deep, dark concentration camp. Most of those people were not from El Salvador. We don't know the names of the vast majority of them. We do know at least 4 of those people. I'm going to read their names for you. Ricardo Prada Vasquez. He was an Uber driver up on the border of Canada working in the United States with legal status. He took a wrong turn crossing the Canadian border. When he came back through Border Patrol, despite being legal status, he was arrested, disappeared, and he was put on that plane and disappeared into Secot in El Salvador. Andre Jose Hernandez Ramiro. He is a Venezuelan barber and musician that fled political persecution in Venezuela. He had legal status in the United States with an asylum claim. He was picked up off the street and disappeared. Joyce Reyes Barrios. He's a former professional soccer player in Venezuela. No criminal record. This man was disappeared into a prison in El Salvador with no criminal charges in a foreign country. And Kilmore Ortega Garcia, who's the most famous one that many of you have probably heard about. He's El Salvadorian with a legal status in the United States. He's married to a U.S. citizen. He has a U.S. citizen daughter. He's a union steelworker working on the east coast of the United States. Never convicted of a crime, never charged with a crime. He was picked up, put on that plane, and disappeared into El Salvador. Our country's never seen fascism before. Just before the Civil War, there was a risk of that, but it was never actually implemented. And now we're seeing fascism being implemented. But when you look at history internationally and how fascism has been implemented in the past, this is a tried and true technique that they use to silence political dissidents. And they're trying this with immigrants and people in the periphery of society that are slightly less protected. And if they can get away with that, they're going to continue to do that. They're going to come down on everyone here, just for speaking out against the government, is at risk of being disappeared. This is a tried and true technique. You arrest people without any crime, and you disappear them out of the country into another place. This is something that's commonly done in Venezuela, which makes me sick to my stomach, because these Venezuelans fled the risk of being disappeared for speaking out against their government. They came to our country for asylum, and they're being disappeared into a third country, into a deep, dark concentration camp. That's evil, and I'm ashamed to say that I'm from the United States when I think about that. It's despicable. So, lastly, where do we go from here? I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I know that Donald Trump was democratically, we can talk about influence and so on and so forth, but votes were elected. Donald Trump was democratically elected this last November, just as Hitler was elected in the early 30s, just as Joe Biden was democratically elected 4 years prior. But the problem is, if you study fascism in other countries, at no point in history, in the history of our world, has this amount of power been taken by an executive and been given back through democratic means. I may be pessimistic in this. I hope we have free and fair elections in a year and a half, and that's something that we're going to have to see. But I think we also have to face the fact that it's very likely that they're going to try to affect our elections, and we may not have free and fair elections in a year and a half. We're going to see. We have to fight. We have to continue to demonstrate. We have to make protests. Moving forward, I think it's important for y'all to read about the People's Power Movement in the Philippines, read about the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine, read about what a general strike in the United States could look like, and what that could be, because we may be moving in that direction. Thank you all for listening.